What is up, world? It's your boy Tan, and you are listening to the Wonton Wealth Podcast. Here, I'm going to unravel anything and everything commercial real estate related. And more importantly, we're going to add abundant value. So if you're ready, buckle up your eardrums. Alrighty, today I have Fernando Angelucci. Is that how you pronounce it?
That's right.
All right. He is a powerhouse in the self-storage space, I just learned, and I want to get you guys all the info that you can on the self-storage side because I'm a novice when it comes to self-storage as well. Fernando, welcome. Please give us an intro on you, a brief background of what you do and how that relates to real estate.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tan. So I'll give you kind of like the 2 minute from where I came to now. Son of two immigrants, went to school. My parents wanted me to do the old school American dream type thing. Go to school, get good grades, work at a Fortune 50 company, retire with a pension. Unfortunately for them, when I was 16, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad and kind of changed my mind on how to earn money, why it's important to be a business owner. From there, I did get a degree in engineering and then went to go work for a Fortune 50 company, actually with a pension. But within 6 months, I started on the habitation real estate side, flipping houses, wholesaling, buying small rentals. Very quickly, I found out that I did not want the 3 T's, toilets, tenants, trash. That's where basically all my headaches came from. So in 2016, we started selling off all of our habitation-based real estate and wholesaling self-storage. And then in 2018, we sold the last of our rental properties and went full bore into buying self-storage facilities and then raising capital from limited partners. So today, we've done over 54 deals across 24 states, $240 million worth of self-storage. Got another 45 million under contract right now, and just launched our newest self-storage fund for our passive investors. So I think as of last month, we're now over 1,000 passive investors in our ventures.
That is absolutely incredible. I'm similar to you. My parents were immigrants as well. They made me go to, well, they didn't technically make me, but they wanted me to go to school to get a profession that was pretty much revered by the community, right? That's why I chose pharmacy. But what I wanted to harp on a little bit here is when you transition from the habitation real estate into self-storage, aside from all the shittiness of having residential tenants, what truly drew you into self-storage as an asset class?
Yeah, so I love real estate. There's so many advantages. It doesn't matter what type of real estate. There's so many advantages that real estate offer that other investments don't. So, for example, leverage. I can get 65 to 80% of the purchase price from a lender, but they don't get any of the tax advantages. They don't get any of the appreciation. They don't get any of the depreciation, right? They just get a fixed payment. So there's not a lot of assets that you can do that in, unlike real estate. The other thing is the tax benefits from bonus depreciation, which now is in full force again, 100% bonus. So there's some deals that the first day that I buy it, I'm already able to write off anywhere between 30 to 90 cents per dollar invested in tax losses. So that makes it not only great for me when I need to shelter capital gains, but then also for my investors. They call me up usually around this time, Thanksgiving, Christmas time, say, hey, my accountant just said I'm going to have a huge tax bill. I need a way to wipe out $200,000 in gains. What do you got for me? And I said, I got a bunch of things for you. Like, what do you want to invest in the self-storage world? So that's number two. But the way that I actually got into it was I knew I wanted to be in real estate, but I didn't want tenants. So I'm just like racking my brain. It's like, what type of real estate is there that doesn't include tenants? Nobody is living or working in your investment. So I basically came to like 3 asset classes. The first was data centers. Unfortunately, I don't have $1 billion in equity to start up, so that one was quickly taken out. The second was mobile homes. And I called a few of my buddies that are mobile home investors and I said, hey, how does this work where you don't have tenants? It's only lot rent. He said, in theory, that's how it is, but in practice, that's actually not the truth. Because what ends up happening is people default on their lot rent. You end up having to repossess their mobile home, and now you have something called a park-owned home, which means you are now a landlord again, right? So I didn't want to do that. So then I fell into self-storage, and then the more I learned about it, the more my eyes just opened up on how, like, what a wonderful investment it is. And I have, I can give you 10 points and expand on each one, on why I chose self-storage over others. You tell me which way you want to go.
Let's take it that route.
All right. All right. So I'm an engineer, so I'm a numbers guy, right? So the very first thing I'm going to be looking at is the upside, so return, and then the downside. What happens when things don't go well? So let's look at the upside. Self storage is one of the highest returning real estate asset classes over the last 40 years. There's a study that was done by the National Association of REITs. So I'll quote some numbers for you, as well as Y charts. Both very good data collection agencies. Let's say you had $100,000 to invest in 1994. What would the value of that $100,000 investment be if you kept reinvesting it in 2021, right? So almost a 30-year period. If you put that into the S&P 500, you'd have about a 10.8% return, which means your $100,000 would be 1.6 million bucks. If you put it into residential, that's a 14.4% return, including, the two crashes that we had. That 100,000 would be worth about $3.8 million. If you put into industrial, that's about a 15.8% annual return. So that 100,000 would be about 5.2 million. But if you put into self-storage has had an 18.8 average annual return over the study period, which means your 100,000 would be worth $10.5 million by the end of that study period. So that, residential's 14.4, self-storage is 18.8. So that 4.4% spread doesn't seem like a lot, but you got to realize compounding interest is the eighth wonder of the world. So, they say the rule of 72. If you divide 72 by your interest rate, it'll tell you how often your money doubles. This just shows that in practice. Over a 3-decade period, you can really create massive wealth in this asset class. So then people say, well, Fernando, if the returns are really good, that must mean that it's super risky. And what we've actually found is that it's actually asymmetric risk and return profile. So let's look at the last two major, recessions that we've had. The most recent, obviously, was the pandemic. According to TREP, which is a commercial mortgage-backed research firm, of the 1,700 CMBS loans that were made to self-storage in the first 3 quarters of 2020, only 3 were delinquent. That is a 0.17% delinquency rate. During that same time, multifamily was defaulting at a rate 1,800% higher, or 18 times the default rate of self-storage. And that makes sense, right? People couldn't pay their rent. They couldn't afford to, they couldn't be evicted because of the rules that were put in place by the government, which we'll talk about a little bit here later. But what do? They had to go back home to work from home. They had to go back home for their kids to go to school from home. So now you just lost 1 to 2 bedrooms, right? Where did you put that stuff? You put it in self-storage, okay? Same thing. Let's go back even farther. Let's look at the Great Financial Crisis, 2007 to 2009. Over that period of time, the S&P 500 dropped 22%. Multifamily and residential dropped between 7 and 10%, depending on which research studies you look at. During that period, self-storage only dropped 3 to 4% in value over that time. And again, it makes sense. Self-storage is a business of trauma and transition. If someone passes away, you need to sell their house, but the kids are emotionally attached to the stuff. What do? They put it in self-storage. You lose your job, you need to downsize. What do? You go to a smaller house, a smaller apartment, maybe you move in with friends or family. You put your stuff in storage for when you get back on your feet. Let's say it's a good thing. Let's say the economy's booming and you're making a ton of money, but you're not ready to upsize your living situation. What do? You end up buying more things because of lifestyle creep, and you start putting things in storage. Or you say you get a job that you have to move for. What do? You typically use self-storage in between the moving process, right? And it makes sense when you look at who's using self-storage. There's kind of both bookends of the generational divide. You got the baby boomers who are retiring in mass, or on the longer end of the baby boomer spectrum, they're going into nursing homes or passing away. Something like 15,000 people per day. These people are coming from the good old days when housing was affordable. They were able to buy a 5-bedroom, 3-bath ranch in the suburbs for really cheap. They had a lot of space. And now they were also the kids of the people that went through the Great Depression. So they were taught to hoard things because you never know when you might need 25 metal spoons that you never use, right? What do you do with that stuff? You end up putting it in storage, or you're going into the nursing home, and the nursing home says you can't bring all this stuff. What are you going to do with it? You end up putting it in storage. Or you're downsizing. Let's say you're going from that 5-bedroom down to a 1-bedroom townhouse or a 2-bedroom townhouse in an active living community if you're on the younger age of the baby boomers. But then you look at the other side of the generational divide, kind of our age group, right? Millennials and below. We are in a massive affordability crisis. Wages have not kept up with housing prices. Interest rates are still, they're relatively normal compared to a 100-year period, but they're a lot higher than they were during the zero interest rate policy days over the last, the 10 years after the great financial crisis. And so what ended up happening is you have asset values exploding, and people cannot afford to buy that 5-bedroom, 3-bath house that their parents or grandparents had. So what do we end up opting for? 1, 2, maybe a 3-bedroom condo, typically in the middle of the action, downtown, near the nightlife, where all the food is. Maybe I don't need to have a car because I live close enough to everything that I'm in like a 15-minute walking community. What these generations are doing is they're using self-storage as an external closet because it's way cheaper to rent a 10 by 10 unit as opposed to buying or renting an additional bedroom on the market today. And I only see self-storage use going up unless overnight we get rid of all of restrictive zoning laws and the NIMBYs just, poof into dust. It's not going to happen. So that's one of the first numbers I saw were like, okay, high return, low risk, or moderate risk compared to the type of return that you're getting. The second thing that I saw was the way the laws and the way the government structure and treat self storage. This is not a ideological argument or not, but governments view housing as a basic human right. We saw this during the pandemic. When people were not paying their rent, the government stepped in to a private business that has nothing to do with the government and said, hey, you can't evict anybody. Now, what a lot of tenants heard was, I don't need to pay my rent because they can't do anything to me. That's not what the government said, but that's what a lot of people were treating it as. But at the same time, they didn't go to the landlord and say, hey, you don't need to pay your property taxes right now. You don't need to pay your mortgage. No. Those guys were still on the hook, as we saw from those pandemic numbers of 18 times the default rate over self-storage. Self-storage is completely different. Nobody, if you evict Granny from her unit because she's 3 to 6 months late or 9 months late on her rent, you're going to get posted all over the local newspapers about being this horrible landlord, and look how they threw Granny out on the street, even though she was stealing. She was committing a crime. That's not what people are going to see, right? No one's going to put you in a headline for auctioning off someone's self-storage unit because they haven't paid in 9 months, right? So the laws are really favorable for us, but then also the public perception. So, for example, self-storage, there's no such things as evictions. We are guided by lien law, not eviction law. So the second you put your possessions into my self-storage unit, you are automatically de facto giving me a lien against your stuff. And the crazy thing is, in almost all states in the United States, if I send you a new lease to sign and you don't sign it, if you are in that unit one day after your old lease expires, that new lease is considered automatically signed. There's no fighting, well, I didn't sign it and I need extra time. No. You are now on my rules, my clauses. So the nice thing of not having evictions, and I'm sure a lot of people that are listening have had the heartburn of going through evictions and tenants not paying, costs a lot of money. First, you miss out, depending on your jurisdiction, you'll miss out on anywhere between 2 to 9 months of rent, depending on what state you're in. Then there's the damage that's typically caused by a tenant that's mad that they're getting evicted for not paying rent, right? So that will usually cost another anywhere 2 to 5 months worth of rent in turnover costs or more if they do some catastrophic stuff. I had a tenant when I used to have multifamily that poured concrete down the toilet, $25,000 damage for one unit, right? So it could be a lot higher. And then you have to market it. You have to usually pay a realtor 1 to 2 months rent to get it rented for you. It's just, there's no profit in it. It's just a bunch of headaches with no profit. And if you are making profit, it's such small amounts. It's like $200 to $400 a door per month. Like that, you can't build wealth like that, right? Self-storage, that doesn't happen. You are 7 days late past our grace period. So rent is due first of the month. If you don't pay, now you're automatically considered late. We give everybody a 7-day grace period, but I don't have to by law. So what I can do is on the second, I can overlock your unit. I can put a red manager lock on your lock so that you cannot open it, or even better, on some of the facilities that are more high tech that I build from the ground up, I can lock them out of the entire facility. They can't even get onto the property because their code to get into the fence doesn't work until they pay off their past due balance. Let's say they don't call me over the next 30 days to pay off their past due balance. I can automatically start the auction process. That typically takes 1 to 2 weeks, depending on what state you're in. So that means by week 6, I am already selling your possessions off to pay all your back due rent. But in addition, pay off all the fees that go along with everything I had to do. If there's any damage, me having to pay for the lien process, me having to pay for attorneys if I have to use them, overlock fees, cleaning fees. So in the end of the day, and then the crazy part is you put this auction up online. It's not like Storage Wars anymore. Everything is like eBay now. Everything's online. Nobody shows up to the actual property. The person that buys the possessions of that unit has to clean out everything in that unit, including broom sweeping it, and they give us a deposit that we get to keep if they don't do that. And usually with us, we'll have the new tenant come the same day or the day after it's cleaned out, and now we have literally we basically lose no rent because all the fees, all the back due rent that we're able to collect from the auction, and then the day that it is available for rent, it is already leased up. So one of the things that was a huge heartburn for me, easily solved in the self-storage space.
I love that. A lot of positives about self-storage here. And I want to take it from the other side now. Have you seen anything negative about self-storage, or have you had any horror stories when it comes to self-storage?
Yeah, so it usually depends on who the operator is, right? We like to buy value add deals. So we want to buy facilities that are not being run well, pay the fair value for those based on their net operating income. Because unlike, let's say, houses, it's not about comparables. The value is based on how much net operating income does that thing produce today. And if you're running it very poorly, you're not charging high enough rents, your expenses are through the roof because you're paying your 2.5 people full time when you only need half of a person, and you're letting them watch TV. They have a $500 a month cable package, which I'm not giving, these are not hypotheticals. These are things that I found when I've been buying self-storage facilities. Then their NOI is very low, which means based on the market capitalization rate, I'm buying it at, in the market a fair price, but I know I can usually double the value of that facility, usually in about 3 to 5 years, depending on the size, right? So, horror stories that I've seen from sellers. One, allowing people to live in the units. Oh, well, so-and-so was just, down on their luck. They just needed a place to stay for 4 days. Big no-no. That's a huge, breaking the law, not allowed. These are non-habitation-based real estate. No one is allowed to live in these units. And the crazy part is, you see, especially during the pandemic, you see videos on YouTube of people being like, let me show you how to live in your self-storage unit with nobody finding out. The people that don't find out are the horrible managers, the horrible operators. If you have someone living in your facility, you don't know what you're doing, right? So that's number one. Number two, just not implementing technology. Self-storage I will admit, it is a laggard when it comes to implementing technology into the space. It's gotten a lot better recently. But for example, I mean, just so crazy. The deals where I make a ton of money on are the ones that I buy where I can't find them online. They don't have a Google My Business page, which means they're not searchable on Google Maps. So right off the bat, now you're losing 60% of potential customers because 60% of potential customers, how do they find a self-storage unit? The very first thing they do is they open up their phone and they type in self-storage in Cincinnati, Ohio. And if you don't show up on there, you're not going to get that rental, right? So that's number one. I know I'm going to make money. Number two, I'll ask them to send me their financials, and they'll literally mail me a yellow legal pad of that's how they've been tracking financials. So they don't have any software. They don't use QuickBooks. So there must be, when that happens, there's a lot of stuff bleeding out of the business that they don't know because they can't track and they can't pull reports. So that's great. And then number three is just not pricing the units appropriately and not charging the fees that is common in the industry. So for example, you get a lot of these owners that they become friends with their tenants. They're the ones sitting behind the desk. So they never raise rates. They have the policy of whatever your rate was when you first started renting, that's what it is now, even if it's 10 years later. Versus what we do, we look at what all the other competitors are charging, and we charge the same thing. If you're late, we charge a late fee. If we overlock you and you have to call to pay off your late balance, we charge an overlock fee because someone has to go out there and remove that lock. Time is not free, right? This is a business. This is not a charity. I would rather make a lot of profit and then use that profit to choose the charities that I want to support. The business is not a charity, right? And then the crazy thing is, because of this, the use of technology, there's some stuff that has been coming out, especially with AI, for example, that has really been increasing revenue. So, for example, demand-based pricing, or what we call dynamic pricing. Look at when you go buy an airline ticket. If you buy it 6 months in advance versus 6 days in advance, it's way cheaper, right? We can do the same thing now. If you want the good, better, best strategy, right? So not only timing, so we have some softwares where the software will see when people are, let's say something happened in Cincinnati, Ohio, where a bunch of people all at once are Googling storage in Cincinnati, Ohio. Our software will catch that and will jack up our rates online, right? Just like how the airline industries do it, right? When they know people are flying into Chicago for the marathon or there's a music festival that's huge, whatever, the rates all of a sudden go through the roof. Thanksgiving, Christmas, we're going into this area right now. If you bought tickets right now to fly out tomorrow, you're going to be paying a hefty fee. But then there's also the good, better, best method. Do you want to sit at the back of the airplane next to the toilets? Do you want to sit in a exit aisle with extra legroom, or do you want to sit in first class or business class? Even though you're all in the same plane, going to the same location, you pay substantially different prices. We are now starting to use that in self-storage as well. So we say, hey, here's the price for a 10 by 10 unit. It's $100, right? But that unit, that $100 unit, is on the third floor in the very back, as far as possible as you can be from the elevator, right? So you got a long distance to run. It's the good unit. But you want the better unit, how about we put you right on the third floor next to the elevator? Instead of paying $100, now you're paying $120. Oh, you want the best unit we have available? The best unit we have available is on the first floor right next to the office where you enter. That one's $150 a unit. And what we find is that like 35+% of the people that are offered this good, better, best choose an upgraded option. So it's still the same 10 by 10 box on a concrete slab, right? Metal box on a concrete slab, but people pay for the convenience, right? It's like the equivalent of paying to be able to board early on the plane. So that is finally coming into our industry. And then the last piece that we have on the technology side is this ability to analyze our current customers to see who can absorb rate increases. So the software will score people from a 1 to a 10. Ones being they will not absorb a rent increase, and if you give them a rent increase, they'll probably move out. And 10s being like you can raise it whatever you want, and they're most likely going to pay. So how does it do this? Well, let's say someone pays with cash and they're late by 10 days every month. That person probably not going to absorb a rent increase very well. They're probably going to move out. But then how about the guy that pays with an Amex card, Amex Platinum card? It's auto pay. He has never called the facility once. And on his public-facing social media channels, he just posted that he's in first class sipping champagne. You think he's going to care if he gets a $30 increase per month in his self-storage facility? No. But that $30 increase on a $100 unit, that's a 30% increase to the bottom line in revenue. It's a huge increase, right? So it will score these people 1 to 10. 1 to 4 usually don't get any increases. 5 to 7 or 8 get moderate increases. And 8, 9, 10, they get the largest increases that we get. And before this, people will just pick an arbitrary number and apply that rate increase to all their customers to, let's say I'm going to raise it 7%. And then guess what? They get people that move out. And then there's people that would have absorbed a 17% increase or a 27% increase. So they're leaving money on the table. So these are some things that I've noticed that have been, if you're not doing these things, I'm going to come buy your property and I'm going to make a ton of money that you should have made, right?
You're going to eat their lunch, right?
Right. I'm going to drink their milkshake.
That's fantastic what AI is able to do nowadays, but and how you're implementing it in your business, via via self-storage. And that's a wrap. If you've made it this far, that means you've listened to the entire episode, so thank you. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please leave a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening from. And if you've learned something or found it useful, share it with one of your homies. And if you want to get in touch with me, I'm pretty active on IG. My handle is pro_TANH. Reach out, let me know what you liked, what you didn't like, or what you want to hear about in the future. I'm here to tailor this to you. Until next time.